Well, welcome back to This Week in Golf on News Talk Saga 960. I'm your host, Chris McKee. My next guest is the founder of the Universal Golf Rankings, which is gaining a lot of traction in the world of golf as an alternate option to the official World Golf Ranking system. I'm joined by Jeff Bullock. Jeff, thanks for joining me.
Chris, thanks for having me.
So can you just explain the idea and concept behind the Universal Golf Ranking system and why you felt the need to create it?
Yeah. So, quick background is we were on a golf trip last November at Kiowa Islands, and we were discussing just what was going on in the golf world and how at the time we felt like the official world golf rankings didn't accurately reflect really the rankings in the golf world, because at the time they had just come out and said they were going to exclude live golfers. But even on top of that, we felt like their system and their methodology was biased towards the PGA Tour, and it didn't give an accurate reflection of the global golf world. And so we put together a team of there's 6 of us, kind of went at it, and the Universal Golf Rankings was created out of that discussion. And the biggest, we're taking a very different approach. So I kind of talk about blueprints, and we see the golf world is shifting and changing, definitely with the advent of live, and that the old blueprints of a points-based system, which is what OWGR is, that doesn't work in this new golf world with more tours, divided tours, and where the best players in the world are playing on different tours. And so happy to kind of dive deep into how we go about doing it, but that's sort of how it was created. And so we've been at it since January of this year, 2023, and we picked up a lot of steam, as you said, and have a lot of really good momentum going.
So can you explain your point systems and what some of the criteria you're using to assess players' rankings?
Yep, exactly. So we take a performance-based approach. So what we do is we map, and we have a big cloud optimizer that does all the math for us, but we map the head-to-head matchups of every player against all of their competitors. So think about it as if you and I play in the same tournament against each other over and over and over, we're going to have a relative performance score against you and me. Maybe you beat me by 3 shots on average every single time we play. Well, I'm going to have that direct connection with every other player who I play against. So the average pro plays against over 400 different competitors every single year. So that's the beauty of golf. It's very interconnected, and it's a global game. So what we can do, if you think about it from a big picture, is we map the head-to-head relative performance of every player against every other player when they play each other. So that's why you get really accurate results, because it's only when they play against each other that we create the direct link. But most players have 400 plus direct links on top of the secondary links where maybe they don't play someone, but they've got a common connection. And that's why it works in our new sort of global blueprint, because live players cross over to the majors and to the Asian Tour and previously to the DP World Tour, and the rest of the world is so interconnected. 80% of pro golfers play on multiple tours, or they play tournaments that are sponsored by multiple tours. So the interconnectivity is great. And the best example that I can give is it's like a satellite system, right? So you only need 4 satellites in a GPS system to pinpoint your exact location on Earth. This is like having 400 satellites pinpointing your exact location. So the exactness is precise, and it's all based on performance. It's not the biggest thing we want to make sure everyone knows is it's not a points-based system. We didn't make up some formula in the back of the room, and it's a black box where we have a hard time explaining how we actually weight certain things. It's all performance driven.
So how long back are you tracking the players? For example, does Sergio Garcia going up against Phil Mickelson in 2004 come into your rankings, or what's the time frame of that, head-to-head sort of with the players you're going with?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's probably the biggest assumption that any ranking system has to make, is how far back do you look? So OWGR looks back 2 years, but they have a weighting system. We look back 12 months. So it's a 12-month look back. Right now, we do not have any type of weighting or de-weighting of tournaments. The Brooks Koepka win at the PGA. We can get into that later. We're maybe looking into, certain things there. But we look back 12 months. So when you look at the rankings today, it's a 12-month look back snapshot.
So is there any difference between points awarded for a win on Live compared to the PGA Tour or DP Tour?
Yep. So remember, it's not a points-based system. It's just a strokes-based system based on relative performance. And so what happens is Live players play against each other all the time, and they're getting a lot of head-to-head matchups. And PGA Tour players play against each other, and they're getting a lot of head-to-head matchups, and DP World Tour, and so on and so on. Then at the majors or Asian Tour events or other places, they're all crossing over. So think about it as everyone's grid, or their matrix, as I like to call it, then starts crossing over and weaving in with everyone else. So the ranking is a relative ranking to each other. So you're not necessarily getting more points or less points at a Live event or at a PGA Tour event. It's just how did you perform relatively to each other? And then we have the big events every year where everyone comes together and all of their grids sort of get intertangled, which is what we want.
So Chris McKee, joined by Jeff Bullock, who's the founder of the Universal Golf Rankings. So for those unfamiliar, your top five right now, you got Jon Rahm, number one, Scotty Scheffler, two, Patrick Cantlay, three, Xander Schauffele, four, and Rory at five. All of that seems reasonable. But then you have Brooks Koepka, who just won the PGA Championship, all the way down at 30. So can you explain to the audience, how's Brooks at 30 right now?
Yeah, so Brooks is rising for sure, and I'm going to call it the Brooks Doctrine, because we might have to make a doctrine out of this situation, because it's such a unique situation what happened. Since we look back 12 months, and we are a performance-based system, Brooks's performance 9 to 12 months ago was really poor. I mean, he was missing cuts on the Asian Tour and having a really hard time. I mean, he was just coming off of surgery. So we have a situation here where we literally have someone who went from on the operating table to winning a major championship in such a short amount of time. And because we look back 12 months and we're still capturing these poor performances from 9 to 12 months ago, there's a lag with him because of his rise so quickly. We put out a tweet about this 2 days ago when we updated our rankings and we explained why he's at 30. And we actually got a lot of really good feedback from sort of the Twitter golf world, which was great, saying, hey, think about this, think about that, because I think people who follow us understand that we're not a points-based system, which is what we like, but there are probably ways that we can accommodate for such a fast rise in your game going from being injured to winning a major championship. So it's something we're looking at. So, if we took our system and looked back 3 months, Brooks is the number one player in the world, right? And so if we had a hottest player in the world list that we published, which maybe we should, number one player in the world. So there's a little catch up going on, which we're trying to see if there needs to be some tweaks there. But I think that's one of the small places that it probably doesn't pass the eye test right now that we're looking to modify.
So you mentioned your Twitter. You can find Jeff at TUGR Golf on Twitter, and his website is tugr.org, the Universal Golf Rankings. And so this week's sensation in the world of golf is Michael Block, the club pro, who showed up and was T15 at the PGA Championship. Is it possible that you've got a system, a slot, a ranking where he is right now on your top 1,000? Because I've scrolled through the list. You've got 1,000 players on there.
Yeah, so there's basically two criteria. So, and we want to keep the ranking simple so people understand. It's head-to-head performance, and then the two assumptions we make are we look back 12 months, and you have to have 20 minimum rounds to make the rankings, right? So when Tiger played in the Masters, and I think he played at the Genesis, if that's right, he was getting rounds in, but he still didn't hit the grid because we wanted 20 minimum rounds to smooth it out. Michael Block, I'm guessing which I would love to do, if we mapped all the PGA sectional events and all the events that he played in leading up to these 12 months, there was probably crossover between other tour events and people who qualified Monday qualifiers to get enough crossover to bring him in. We just haven't done that yet. It's a similar discussion to Sam Bennett at the Masters, right? I mean, he finished tied for 16th there as an amateur. And the reality is we probably have enough data to incorporate him into the system because there's enough amateurs that get sponsors exemptions and then all the college data that if we actually crossed over the two lists, we could have a global, a true universal, hence the name, a true universal golf rankings list, regardless of tour or status, amateur status. We just haven't done that yet, right? So.
Well, have you been approached by the PGA Tour, DP Tours in any way? Has there been any sort of conversation about interest in the Universal Golf Ranking System?
We've not been approached by either of those tours. We've had a lot of discussions behind the scenes with a lot of players in the industry, and that's probably about all I can say about that. So there is a lot of interest. We are being noticed. I think people recognize the pure approach to how we're doing the ranking system, the unbiased approach, how we're not weighting or overweighting certain things, and how you can get a really good snapshot of where things are at. We're very excited just with what we have, with conversations that we're having right now, and we think that we can make a difference in the golf world. And if we take jabs at OWGR just because our goal is honestly to become the new benchmark for golf ranking systems. But at the end of the day, we want to work with them. We want to work with the tour. We want to work with all tours, because the biggest, where we see the biggest differences in our rankings compared to OWGR isn't necessarily the top 25 or the top 50. You listed off our top 5, that passes the smell test, right? If you look at our top 25 and top 50, I think when I looked at our top 50 at the beginning of the week, there's 8 different players in our top 50 compared to their top 50. So you have 42 that we're saying are roughly the same. The biggest difference we see is in 50 through 500, right? Or 250 through 1,000. Because where we feel like there's embedded biases in the OWGR system, it punishes certain tours and certain players. And I always talk about how there's golfers that just get stuck in OWGR purgatory. They're playing really well, but because of just the system of the OWGR, that they award exponential points to your finish place, that you just get stuck. And I think a great example was Wyndham Clark. I mean, we had Wyndham 50 to 70 places higher than what OWGR had this entire year as he slowly went up. So when he won at Wells Fargo, it really wasn't that big of a shocker for us. He was already ranked 30th in the world in our rankings when he won. And then the week after he won, OWGR got him up to 30. And so they were just playing catch up, but his skill level was already showing that he was that type of player. And so that's where we feel like we can make a big difference, is maybe on these different tours where these up and coming golfers are trying to make a name for themselves, but they're just not getting the looks because they're not being accurately ranked.
Have you been approached by anyone, in Vegas as far as betting line odds and that? Because it seems like you talk about Wyndham Clark was already ranked high. That would maybe tip off some bettors to be like, hey, this guy's got some information maybe somebody else doesn't. So any connections to anything to do with Vegas or any of the gambling sites?
Yeah, we haven't been approached by them, and honestly, we haven't pursued it. We didn't build Tugger for the purpose of gambling. There's some sites out there and some other ranking systems that sort of focus on that, and our focus and goal is to be the global benchmark for golf rankings. So it's really not anything that we are pursuing.
So we're here in Canada, Jeff. I'm joined by Jeff Bullock, the founder of the Universal Golf Rankings. And we got to talk Canadian. So you have Corey Connors as the highest ranked Canadian at number 23. Yep. He made a 15-spot jump this week from last week. So how was it that Connors was able to make such a big leap? Because Brooks Koepka only moved up 16 spots and he won the PGA, and Connors, what was he, T12 or something like that? Yet he moved 15 spots up.
Yep. So again, this kind of goes back to the Brooks Doctrine that we might have to tweak and look at. But since we're a rolling 12-month ranking system, that means every week one event rolls off and one event rolls on. And so if you have an event 12 months ago that rolled off, that was a poor event, and you rolled on a good event, then your relative performance is going to be a lot better. So I'm guessing, I don't know, I could take a look, I'm guessing Corey's PGA last year was a poor performance. And so he rolled off a poor performance. He rolled on a good performance. And so relative, to the whole matrix of professional golf, it was a net positive for him. That's exactly what happened with Brooks too. Brooks rolled off a poor PGA and from last year and rolled on a win this year. Again, he's just being weighed down by some poor performances that are still within his matrix. But again, that if there's one area we're looking at to improve, it's that. But going back to Corey, I mean, Corey's been playing awesome. Obviously, he's got a win this year. If you want to know how to read our rankings, which I think is important, so the number that's next to our rankings. So if you go to Tugger.org and click on the actual rankings, everything is benchmarked against the best player in the world. So Jon Rahm is at 0. And everyone has a number relative to Jon Rahm. And that number represents how many shots per round worse they usually shoot against the best player in the world when they play against him. So, Scotty Scheffler's at 0.07. It's basically a wash. In any given tournament, Scotty and Rahm are within the same shot. But I'm looking at Corey. Corey's at 1.5 shots per round worse than Jon Rahm. So in any kind of random tournament over the last 12 months, Rahm has shot 6 shots better than Corey when they play head to head, right? 1.5 shots per round. So that's how you read it. But it shows you that there's a huge difference between the top 50 in the world and then everyone else. Like the curve really goes up. There's almost 2.5 shots per round difference between the number 1 player and the 100th player in the world. But then it gets really tight. And it just shows you how literally one shot here and there can be the difference between 400th place in the world and 200th place in the world. And Corey's done a great job because he's kind of in that top 25 playing great golf. And he's just playing really good golf. And I think the wins and the top 10s show it.
Has creating this system made golf more fun or more difficult for you to watch? Maybe is it frustrating in your way? Hey, it should be this way. This guy should be kind of ranked here and stuff like that. Is it put a skew? Because I stopped playing fantasy football because it affected my ability to watch football. So has this done that kind of for golf for you?
It's definitely it's made it more fun, and it's just made me more aware actually of the interconnectivity of golf. And so I get excited when I see someone like Padraig Harrington make the cut at a PGA Tour event, because then I say, great, now Padraig Harrington has 4 rounds of golf against 150 plus players, and then he's going to go play on the Champions Tour. And then he went over in Dubai and took 4th, if I'm remembering the correct tournament earlier this year. So Padraig's a global player, and I would never care or even think about Padraig Harrington playing in a PGA Tour event, but that strengthens our system when you get somebody who's a global player playing on multiple tours making the cut. And so I'm just much more aware of the interconnectivity of golf. And it excites me because we're really passionate about what we're doing. And every time you see somebody who kind of creates another link or another web, it's cool to see.
So Chris McKee with Jeff Bullock, who's the founder of the Universal Golf Rankings. And so, Jeff, in closing, any new initiatives you're working on? I mean, this system could maybe be applied to NBA draft prospects or NFL draft prospects. Anything else new you're looking to steer this?
Yeah, and not idea towards any other sport right now. I think I'd love to do this towards the NCAA basketball championship, right? Because you get so many brackets, and if you've mapped all the interconnected, games throughout the season, you might get a really cool ranking that way. But we're focusing on golf. The next step might be into the amateur space of creating an actual global amateur rankings, because they, in the amateur space, they have the same issues that the pros have, is that it's a points-based system that skews towards certain areas of the amateur space and isn't really a great reflection of who's better than who. And we've had discussions with college coaches on how to implement that, but we're focusing on the pros right now. We feel like we're making a lot of headway. We're shaking things up, and like I said, we want to help. We take jabs at OWGR, but at the end of the day, it's because we have a system that works. And lastly, we publish the accuracy of our system. We try and be completely transparent. So on our Twitter feed every single week on Sunday night or Monday morning, we post how accurate we were for that tournament against the OWGR, and we're batting 100%. Every single tournament, and we take 5 different ways of measuring accuracy, because there's no one perfect way to measure accuracy. But if we're beating them every single week through 5 different ways of measuring accuracy, it means we're onto something. So despite the fact that we might need to tweak something with the Brooks Doctrine, as I'm calling it, the system is already showing that it is way more accurate than OWGR. And I would think that the governing bodies, if you're truly trying to create a system that shows who are the best golfers in the world so that you can invite the best golfers to the best tournaments, you would probably want to take interest in something like this.
Don't forget, you can check out Jeff's site and all the full rankings 1 through 1,000 at TUGR.org. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.